Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party for another session of our series that we're running on how to work with the department or what issues you may face when confronted with having a child removed. Now these series are important because they hopefully will provide you with information about how you can best work and negotiate the issues around child protection and how you can work particularly with the department and the workers. I'm going to talk to you today about parenting capacity assessments. Now, in different states and in different places of the world, they might be called different things. Here in South Australia, they're called PCAs or parenting capacity assessments. Now, this is where the department wants to assess you, and the social workers basically believes that they don't have the capability to be able to do so in an authoritative manner. So they employ a psychologist, which can be an in-house, a government-paid psychologist that works for the government, or they could ask an independent person to do the assessment on their behalf. Now, often what this means is that either way, you're going to be assessed from the psychological perspective about your working with or your ability to work with the child that has been, or the children that have been removed. Now, this is important to understand how this process works. Firstly, it's a psychological assessment, not necessarily done by an expert in attachment theory or even an expert in children. And often, in my experience, they are young people who have got a degree in psychology but aren't necessarily a clinical psychologist. But the people that you get from outside the organisation who are asked to do this work are often clinical psychologists. They're going to look at you and how you think about and how you respond to the issues that the department have raised in relation to you and your child. The important thing I think to understand here is that you need to be honest with them. You need to talk from your heart about what has happened to you, the reasons perhaps why you find yourself in this situation. But it is also vitally important to give them a sense that you understand the child's experiences of the issues that has meant that the child has been removed, to understand them, to comprehend what it is that is happening. If you deny those issues, if you minimise those issues, if you don't talk about the impact that those issues have on your children, whether you agree with it or not, will determine how that assessment will eventually work out. One of the things they look for primarily are the degree to which you can regulate your emotions. Now, incidentally, I have a problem with this idea about regulating emotions. I don't know specifically what it means. I'm sure if I asked a psychologist that attempt to tell me, and I probably wouldn't agree with them. But basically, it is about understanding the degree to which you may be feeling emotional. Why do you feel this emotional? Being able to articulate that, which is often very difficult when you're dealing with an emotive issue such as a child being removed, and how you can express those emotions in relation to the child. So they'll often see that if you're being extremely emotional, traumatised by what has happened, that is detrimental to the child, that it will have a negative effect on the child because you are so consumed with your own emotions that you haven't got much time to deal with whatever's happening for the child at the time. That's the way they view it. I have an issue around that for basically simple reasons, that is that you can't necessarily control all emotions when you're grieving for something as severe as having lost a child. So I understand that. But it is important to be aware, those two things I guess, that need to be honest with them, talk about how your past experiences have shaped you, the impact they've had perhaps on your parenting, and generally about how you view the world, and what it is that you've done to address those particular issues. People are pretty smart, and I'm not suggesting psychologists are dumb by any stretch of the imagination. They are smart people to have got to where they've got to, but they will be aware whether you're disguising emotions, whether you're hiding emotions, whether there are issues that you are not talking about that they think you should be talking about. And sometimes this comes about because the behaviour of the parent has been such that it is a strong indicator that there has been some degree of trauma in that person's life, whether it be mental health issues, drug use, or domestic violence. They're aware of what those issues are, and they will pick up on them, and they will perhaps criticise you when they write their report. Now, the report is written for the purpose of being able to define from a more professional standpoint, because social workers clearly are not professional enough to be able to do this themselves. They are there because they are a few levels above a social worker, because they're psychologists, and the psychologist therefore is to give an opinion about a series of interviews and then how you have performed during those interviews. Now, they can assess you a number of ways. They can say that you didn't contribute, you weren't forthcoming, that you weren't addressing the key issues that the department have identified anyway, and that you're basically a crappy parent. Or they could accept that you're acknowledging all the issues that have confronted you, you are expressing a degree of understanding around those issues and their impact on a child, and that you're doing the work, even though you may not be there, you're doing the work to get your child back. The final one is they may say that two things, that they can't understand the reasons why the child has been removed at all. Very rare that that would happen. And that you are together and that you're a good parent and you've got all the skills required. Or they may say at the other end of the spectrum, well, you know, we don't think that you are capable. And I've seen this in reports too. They'll say, you know, we don't believe that you're capable of actually dealing with those issues, of ever getting to a point whereby the child will be safe in your care, and consequently we're going to suggest that we go for a long-term order. There is actually a third alternative, and that is that they might say, well, we can see progress is being made, we can see that this person has a degree of understanding, but there is still some way for them to travel. And so therefore, we're going to suggest that they have a shorter term order, 6-month, 12-month order, in order to tick a few boxes, further evaluation, and we'll see where we go at the end of that. And that's the recommendation that they place to the social workers in the department. Now, the thing to remember here is that this is only a recommendation that they're going to be making to the department. It's not cast in stone. It means bugger all. I've seen the department completely reject the recommendations that the psychologist has made. And that happens both ends of the spectrum. Not all that long ago, psychologists suggested the child be taken on long-term care. The department disagreed with that and they returned the child. I've seen others, of course, where they suggest that the child be returned within a certain period of time to the parent and the department go completely in a completely different direction. So there's no guarantee, but they are a helpful indicator, I think, as to the direction that the department can go. And if you've watched my previous video on advocacy, you will know that it is good to have an advocate who can talk about some of these things. Now, an advocate can take this report and can highlight the areas that have to be improved, the strengths that were identified, and focus on moving towards what the report is suggesting, if it's a good report suggesting that a child can be returned after a period of time. The problem is that you'll never probably have social workers who 100% agree with what the psychologist has written anyway. And you'll have a bank of social workers who will work actively against you in order to have your child returned to you regardless of what these reports say. Just be wary. I don't object to people getting parenting capacity assessment reports, but I also, where you think the report's going to be unhelpful, I also suggest you go and get an independent one. Because if the matter goes to court, and some parents will say, I don't care what that report says, I'm going to go to court anyway, even if it's a 12-month order, or they're asking for a 12-month order or a shorter term order. I think I should have the child back in my care. I'm I'm going to push the envelope as best as I can. And that's fine, that's your decision, no objection to that. But be wary when you do, if you go ahead and there's a shorter order in place, you need to make sure along the way that you've ticked all the boxes and continue to tick them, and that you always have an advocate with you who can push the envelope with regard to the social workers, so that your interest and the best interests of your child are upheld. Because often social workers will forget about whatever the psychologist's report has said, and they will simply develop their own opinion about you, and that may be negative in terms of having a child returned to you. And also, if you go to, in South Australia, you can go to a reunification court, and in other states you can go through certain procedures in order to have a child slowly returned to you. But make sure that there is progress being made. I've worked with many cases where after 10 months of a 12-month order, the department social workers haven't even decided to go for a reunification of any description. And that often has been, at the end of the day, they go for a long-term order. They have to be pushed at the very beginning to go for, at the court case where they're now ordering a short-term order, push for reunification as soon as possible. Find out from them what that looks like. Once a parent incapacity assessment has been done, there should not be any other need for an assessment. That is the so-called professional giving that assessment. That should be it. And if the department wish to do any other assessments, then basically too late. They can still do drug tests. They can check on mental health care providers if you're seeing them. But really, the basic assessment has been done by this point. Decision has been made. Short-term order may be, or the child returned back to you. I hope that was helpful. If you've got any further issues and you'd like to have a chat to me further, send us an email at the email address below. And if you're watching this particular video on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for further notifications. Thanks for being with me. Take care, look after yourself, and more importantly, be safe.